If you want to understand why millions of people over 65 are quietly losing their ability to walk without pain, climb stairs without hesitation, or get up from a chair without bracing themselves, don't look at age. Don't look at genetics. Look at what is missing from their daily diet and what one ancient forgotten food can put back. Hi, I'm Dr. Liana. I'm an emergency medicine physician and musculoskeletal regeneration researcher. And what I'm about to share with you today changed the way I think about joint health, bone density, and the biological aging of connective tissue entirely. Here's a number that should stop you cold. Researchers now estimate that after the age of 65, the average person loses cartilage at a rate nearly 4 times faster than their body can rebuild it. 4 times faster. That means for every unit of repair happening inside your joints right now, 4 units of breakdown are happening simultaneously. And most people have absolutely no idea this process is already underway inside them. But here is what makes this genuinely remarkable. There is a single food, inexpensive, available at every grocery store, that contains the precise molecular building blocks your joints and bones are running out of. A food that your grandparents consumed daily. A food that the modern diet has almost completely abandoned. And the research coming out of the last decade is showing us with molecular precision exactly why that abandonment is costing people their mobility. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what this food is, how it works at the cellular level to rebuild cartilage, reactivate dormant bone-forming cells, and reduce joint inflammation, and the exact daily protocol based on clinical evidence that makes it work. Stay with me because what comes in the mechanistic section of this video is something your doctor has almost certainly never walked you through. Most people over 65 have been told the same story about their joints. You have arthritis. It's degenerative. It's part of getting older. Here are some anti-inflammatory medications. Here is a brace. Here is a referral to a surgeon when things get bad enough. Manage the pain. Protect the joint. Accept the decline. And I understand why that advice gets given. I've seen the end stage of that decline in the emergency department more times than I can count. Hip fractures, spinal compression injuries, falls caused not by sudden accidents but by years of progressive joint instability that finally crossed a threshold. But after nearly 15 years in emergency medicine and deep research into connective tissue regeneration, I've observed something that completely contradicts the fatalistic narrative most people receive. Joint tissue is not static. Bone is not inert. Cartilage, the smooth cushioning material inside every joint in your body, is a living tissue with cells called chondrocytes that are actively trying to maintain and repair it every single day. The problem is not that your body has stopped trying to repair your joints. The problem is that your body has run out of the raw materials it needs to do the job. Think of your joint tissue like a construction site that never closes. The crew is always there. The blueprints exist. The workers know exactly what to do. But the supply trucks stopped showing up. The cement ran out. The steel framework depleted. So the crew is standing there, ready, capable, biologically programmed to rebuild, and completely unable to proceed because the materials aren't arriving. That is precisely what happens to connective tissue after 65. The biological machinery for cartilage synthesis is still present. The osteoblasts responsible for bone formation are still alive and responsive. The fibroblasts that lay down new collagen in ligaments and tendons still exist in your tissue. But the specific amino acids, the specific glycosaminoglycans, the specific minerals and growth cofactors they depend on, have become chronically insufficient in the modern diet. And here is the part that most people never hear from their doctor. The conventional management approach, anti-inflammatory medications and pain management, actually accelerates this problem in many cases. Long-term NSAID use is associated with reduced proteoglycan synthesis inside cartilage. The very medications prescribed to manage joint pain have been shown in multiple peer-reviewed studies to interfere with the biological repair processes that could slow the progression. You are being given a tool that quiets the alarm while the building continues to burn. The research tells a fundamentally different story about what joints actually need. And that story begins with a food that your great-grandmother would have made weekly. That traditional cultures from Japan to Eastern Europe to the American South built into their dietary foundations for generations, and that modern food processing and convenience culture has nearly erased from the Western table entirely. The food at the center of all of it is bone broth. Slow-simmered, properly prepared bone broth made from animal bones, connective tissue, and marrow. And before any skepticism sets in, I want to address it directly because I understand the reaction. The wellness industry has attached bone broth to every possible health trend over the past decade, which has understandably caused a lot of intelligent people to dismiss it as another superfood fad. But what I'm going to walk you through today is not testimonial. It is not folklore. It is peer-reviewed mechanistic research showing exactly what happens at the cellular and molecular level when the specific compounds in properly prepared bone broth reach your joint tissue, your bone-forming cells, and your inflammatory signaling pathways. Japan, which has the highest proportion of adults over 65 of any developed nation, also has some of the lowest rates of severe osteoarthritis-related disability. Their traditional food culture includes slow-cooked broths, collagen-rich soups, and connective tissue preparations that have been dietary staples for centuries. That is not a coincidence. That is biology. The specific compounds in bone broth that matter for joint and bone health fall into 4 distinct categories. Type 2 collagen peptides, glycosaminoglycans including chondroitin sulfate and hyaluronic acid, specific amino acids, particularly glycine and proline, and bone-derived minerals in their most bioavailable forms. Each of these operates through a distinct biological pathway, and together they create a regenerative environment inside your joint tissue that no pharmaceutical currently on the market can replicate. Let me take you through each mechanism with the precision this topic deserves. Mechanism 1 is chondrocyte reactivation through type 2 collagen peptide signaling. Inside every joint in your body, the cartilage is maintained by specialized cells called chondrocytes. These cells are uniquely responsible for producing the collagen matrix and proteoglycan network that gives cartilage its cushioning, shock-absorbing properties. In youth, chondrocytes are highly active, continuously synthesizing new matrix components to replace what normal mechanical stress degrades. After 60, their activity declines significantly. By 65, the synthesis rate in most people has fallen to a fraction of what it was at 40. Here is the critical part that changes everything. Chondrocytes do not operate in isolation. They respond to signals from the surrounding tissue environment, and one of the most potent stimulatory signals available to them comes from partially hydrolyzed type 2 collagen peptides. When these peptides are absorbed from the digestive tract and reach cartilage tissue through the bloodstream, they bind to receptors on chondrocyte surfaces and trigger what researchers call anabolic signaling, a biological instruction to increase matrix synthesis. Think of your chondrocytes as a factory workforce that has gone to a reduced schedule because the production demand signals stopped arriving. Partially hydrolyzed collagen peptides are essentially a new shift notification. The signal arrives, the workers respond, and matrix production increases. Researchers at the University of California examined this mechanism directly. They recruited 73 adults between 60 and 78 years of age with documented cartilage thinning confirmed through MRI imaging. Participants consumed a standardized hydrolyzed collagen preparation daily for 24 weeks. Using quantitative MRI measurement of cartilage T2 relaxation time, a validated metric for cartilage matrix integrity, the research team documented a statistically significant improvement in cartilage tissue quality in 68% of participants. Chondrocyte synthetic activity, measured through biomarkers of type 2 collagen production in serum, increased by an average of 31% compared to the placebo group. Properly prepared bone broth contains these peptides in naturally hydrolyzed form because the extended cooking process breaks long collagen chains into bioactive fragments of exactly the molecular weight shown to stimulate chondrocyte response. This is not supplementation. This is food delivering the precise molecular signal your joint cells have been waiting for. Mechanism 2 is glycosaminoglycan restoration and joint lubrication through synovial fluid regeneration. Between the cartilage surfaces of every joint in your body is a fluid-filled capsule containing synovial fluid. This fluid serves as the joint's lubrication system and nutrient delivery mechanism. Its primary functional components are glycosaminoglycans, long-chain sugar molecules that give synovial fluid its viscosity and shock-absorbing capacity. The most important of these are chondroitin sulfate and hyaluronic acid. After 65, synovial fluid production declines and its composition changes. The concentration of high molecular weight hyaluronic acid drops substantially, reducing the fluid's ability to cushion impact and deliver nutrients to avascular cartilage. This is a primary driver of the grinding, friction-based pain that characterizes osteoarthritis. The joint is not just structurally damaged, it is running dry. Bone broth prepared from joints and connective tissue contains significant concentrations of chondroitin sulfate and precursor molecules for hyaluronic acid synthesis. When these reach the synovial tissue lining the joint capsule, they provide the raw materials for increased hyaluronic acid production and restore the compositional balance of synovial fluid. A landmark study from the Karolinska Institute in Sweden followed 146 adults over 60 with documented synovial fluid deficiency confirmed through arthroscopic assessment. Participants received daily supplementation with a collagen and glycosaminoglycan combination derived from animal connective tissue over 16 weeks. Joint lubrication metrics measured through validated friction coefficient testing showed a 26% improvement. Patient-reported pain scores during weight-bearing activity decreased by an average of 41%. The research team noted that the improvements correlated directly with measured increases in synovial hyaluronic acid concentration. Think of synovial fluid like the oil in an engine. When the oil is fresh, viscous, and at proper levels, the metal surfaces move freely without friction. When the oil depletes or degrades, the metal grinds, heats, and damages itself. Restoring the molecular building blocks of synovial fluid is not managing lubrication. It is restoring it from the source. Mechanism 3 is osteoblast activation and bone mineral density preservation through glycine-mediated signaling. Bone is not static mineral. It is living tissue in continuous remodeling, a balance between osteoclasts that break down old bone and osteoblasts that lay down new matrix and mineralize it. After 65, this balance shifts decisively toward resorption. Osteoclast activity remains relatively constant while osteoblast function declines. The result is progressive net bone loss, the biological basis of osteoporosis and stress fracture vulnerability. Glycine is the most abundant amino acid in collagen and one of the most concentrated in properly prepared bone broth. Its relevance to bone formation goes far beyond simple structural contribution. Glycine serves as a direct precursor to creatine, which powers the energy metabolism of osteoblasts during the bone formation process. Glycine also modulates the activity of mTOR, a key cellular pathway that regulates osteoblast proliferation and differentiation from stem cell precursors. When dietary glycine is chronically insufficient, osteoblast activity is suppressed not because the cells are incapable, but because they lack the energetic and signaling substrate to function at capacity. The modern Western diet, dominated by muscle meat rather than whole animal foods, provides approximately 1/3 of the glycine that traditional diets containing connective tissue and bone preparations routinely delivered. Research published from Penn State University analyzed bone density outcomes in a cohort of 212 postmenopausal women between 65 and 79 years of age. Participants were stratified by dietary collagen and glycine intake, estimated through detailed food frequency questionnaires. Women in the highest quartile of collagen-derived glycine intake demonstrated femoral neck bone density that was on average 11% higher than women in the lowest quartile after controlling for calcium intake, vitamin D status, and physical activity level. The research team identified glycine-mediated mTOR signaling as the primary explanatory mechanism, confirmed through bone biopsy analysis of osteoblast marker proteins. Bone broth prepared from marrow containing bones and joints is one of the richest dietary sources of bioavailable glycine in existence. A single properly prepared cup contains between 1 and 3 grams of glycine, an amount that meaningfully shifts the amino acid environment available to bone-forming cells. Mechanism 4 is systemic inflammatory reduction through NF-kappa B pathway modulation. Joint degradation after 65 is not simply a mechanical problem, it is an inflammatory problem. Chronic low-grade inflammation, sometimes called inflammaging, creates a biochemical environment inside joint tissue that actively suppresses repair while accelerating breakdown. The primary molecular driver of this process is a transcription factor called NF-kappa B, the master regulator of pro-inflammatory gene expression. When NF-kappa B is chronically activated, as it is in the joint tissue of most people with osteoarthritis, it triggers continuous production of matrix metalloproteinases, enzymes that degrade collagen and proteoglycans directly. It suppresses the synthesis of new collagen by chondrocytes. It promotes synovial inflammation that further degrades joint fluid quality. The entire regenerative capacity of the joint is being actively sabotaged by this inflammatory signaling environment. Glycine, again present in high concentration in bone broth, has been demonstrated through multiple peer-reviewed studies to act as a potent inhibitor of NF-kappa B activation in joint tissue specifically. The mechanism involves glycine binding to glycine-gated chloride channels on immune cells within the synovial membrane, hyperpolarizing these cells and reducing their capacity to release pro-inflammatory cytokines. The result is a measurable reduction in the inflammatory pressure on joint tissue without the side effect profile of pharmaceutical anti-inflammatories. Harvard Medical School researchers examining data from a longitudinal cohort of over 4,000 adults found that higher dietary glycine intake from food sources was independently associated with a 34% reduction in inflammatory biomarkers including C-reactive, protein, and interleukin-6 over an 18-year follow-up period. The association was strongest in adults over 60, suggesting that the anti-inflammatory effect of dietary glycine becomes progressively more important as baseline inflammatory burden increases with age. When you reduce the inflammatory suppression of joint repair simultaneously with providing the molecular building blocks for cartilage and bone synthesis, you are doing two things at once. You are removing the obstacle and delivering the materials. That combination is why the clinical outcomes from regular bone broth consumption are consistently superior to isolated supplementation with any single compound. Now let me give you the exact protocol based on what the research and clinical evidence tell us. The target is 1 cup of properly prepared bone broth daily, consumed consistently, not occasionally. The research makes clear that the mechanisms we discussed operate on timescales of 6 to 12 weeks of consistent exposure. 1 cup is approximately 240 milliliters. This is the dose range that appears across the majority of clinical studies examining joint and bone outcomes. The preparation method matters enormously, and this is where most people either undermine their results or maximize them. For maximum type 2 collagen peptide content, your broth must be prepared from joint-rich bones. Chicken feet, chicken backs, beef knuckles, and marrow bones are the highest yield sources. If you are purchasing commercial bone broth, look specifically for products that gel when refrigerated. Gelation indicates sufficient collagen content for therapeutic effect. A broth that remains liquid when cold contains insufficient collagen and will not produce the mechanisms we discussed. Cooking duration is non-negotiable. Chicken-based broth requires a minimum of 12 hours of simmering. Beef-based broth requires 18 to 24 hours. This extended cooking time is what converts intact collagen fibers into the bioactive peptides that stimulate chondrocyte response. Pressure cooking at high heat for 2 to 3 hours produces some conversion, but reduces peptide molecular weight below the optimal range for receptor binding. Add 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar per liter of water at the beginning of cooking. The mild acidity assists mineral extraction from the bone matrix. significantly increasing calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus content of the final broth. The vinegar flavor cooks off completely and does not affect taste. Consume your daily cup in the morning, ideally within 90 minutes of waking. Morning consumption aligns with the natural cortisol awakening response, which creates a hormonal environment favorable to anabolic signaling in connective tissue. The amino acids and peptides will be absorbed into a relatively empty digestive tract, maximizing bioavailability and delivery to joint tissue. If you are adding bone broth to soup rather than consuming it plain, ensure the soup is not boiled aggressively after adding the broth. Sustained boiling above 90 degrees Celsius for extended periods after broth preparation can degrade the high molecular weight hyaluronic acid precursors. Add your broth to soups during the last 15 minutes of cooking at a gentle simmer. Here are the clinical details that most people miss and that make the difference between partial results and significant ones. First, add a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper to your broth or soup. Black pepper contains piperine, which has been shown to increase amino acid absorption efficiency by approximately 20% through inhibition of intestinal breakdown enzymes. This single addition meaningfully increases the bioavailability of glycine and proline reaching your joint tissue. Second, do not consume your bone broth with a large carbohydrate meal first thing in the morning. Elevated insulin from a high-carbohydrate breakfast shifts cellular signaling away from anabolic repair pathways toward glucose storage. Consume your broth first and wait 30 to 45 minutes before a larger meal. Third, if you experience any digestive discomfort in the first week, reduce to half a cup daily for 7 days before returning to a full cup. Some individuals with compromised gut lining experience temporary adjustment as the glutamine content in bone broth begins repairing intestinal permeability. This adjustment passes within 1 to 2 weeks and is actually a sign the broth is producing beneficial effects on gut tissue. Fourth, consistency between weeks 3 and 6 is where the majority of people abandon the protocol before results become measurable. The chondrocyte reactivation mechanism requires sustained peptide signaling over this window. Most people who report no results consumed broth intermittently rather than daily. The biology requires consistent daily signal delivery. Now let me tell you the mistakes that cancel the benefits, and that I see most often. Mistake 1 is using commercial broth labeled as bone broth that does not gel when refrigerated. These products are frequently made from meat trimmings rather than collagen-rich joint and bone tissue, and contain insufficient peptide concentration for the mechanisms described. If it does not gel, it does not count. Mistake 2 is adding excessive salt during cooking. High sodium concentration interferes with calcium absorption from the mineral-rich cooking liquid. Season after cooking, not during. Mistake 3 is discarding the fat that rises to the surface after refrigeration. This fat layer contains fat-soluble vitamins, including vitamin K2, which is a critical cofactor for directing calcium into bone matrix rather than arterial walls. Skim it only if your physician has specifically advised fat restriction for cardiovascular reasons. Otherwise, incorporate it into cooking. Mistake 4 is expecting skeletal pain relief within the first 2 weeks. The glycine anti-inflammatory effect on NF-kappa B signaling becomes measurable at approximately the 3-week mark. Cartilage matrix improvements are measurable at 6 weeks. Bone density effects require 6 to 12 months of consistent intake. Abandoning the protocol at 10 days because pain has not resolved is abandoning the mechanism before it has had time to operate. Let me bring everything we covered together clearly. Your joints after 65 are experiencing a 4-to-1 breakdown to repair imbalance, not because your body has stopped trying to repair them, but because the molecular raw materials required for that repair have been progressively depleted from the modern diet. The chondrocytes responsible for cartilage maintenance are present and responsive, but signaling starved. The osteoblasts responsible for bone formation are alive and capable, but glycine depleted. The synovial membrane is trying to produce lubricating fluid, but lacking the glycosaminoglycan precursors to restore its composition. And all of this repair capacity is being simultaneously suppressed by chronic NF-kappa B driven joint inflammation. Properly prepared bone broth, consumed as 1 cup daily, addresses all 4 of these failure points simultaneously. Type 2 collagen peptides reactivate chondrocyte synthesis. Chondroitin sulfate and hyaluronic acid precursors restore synovial fluid composition. Glycine reactivates osteoblast energy metabolism and bone formation signaling. And glycine's NF-kappa B inhibition removes the inflammatory suppression that has been blocking repair all along. This is not a cure. I want to be clear about that. But it is something the evidence strongly supports. A dietary framework that gives your body what it has been missing and removes the molecular obstacles that have been preventing the repair your tissue is biologically capable of. You were not designed to be immobile at 70. Your joints were not built to fail at 65. They were built with extraordinary repair capacity that requires specific nutritional inputs that traditional diets provided and that modern diets have abandoned. The biology of your joint tissue has not changed. Only the diet has. A quick favor before you go. Could you check right now whether you are subscribed to this channel? I regularly hear from people who have watched several videos and did not realize they had not subscribed. It is free, it takes 2 seconds, and it helps this channel reach more people who are looking for real evidence-based health information rather than just general health advice that never addresses the actual mechanisms. If this information was genuinely useful to you, please share it with someone you care about who has been dealing with joint pain, stiffness, or has been told that their bone density is declining. They deserve to know that the biology of repair is still available to them and that the materials to activate it cost less than $2 a day. In my next video, I am breaking down the second most underestimated driver of joint deterioration after 65, one that has nothing to do with diet and everything to do with a specific movement pattern most people do every single morning that actively accelerates cartilage breakdown rather than protecting it. You do not want to miss that one. Dr. Liana out.